The room was alive with laughter, clinking glasses, and the soft strains of a string quartet. Golden candlelight reflected off crystal, casting a warm glow across the polished oak table where the couple and their closest family members had gathered to celebrate 25 years of marriage. The husband, Michael, dressed in a tailored black tuxedo, smiled at everyone, though his eyes flickered with a hidden tension, a thrill of anticipation that no one else noticed. He had spent weeks planning this moment, rehearsing lines in the mirror, imagining the shock and awe that would wash over his wife, Victoria. Victoria, radiant in a silver gown, moved gracefully through the room, her eyes sparkling, unaware of the storm about to descend. She greeted friends and family warmly, her laughter genuine, but beneath her calm demeanor a quiet strength had been growing for months. She knew things no one else did, secrets tucked away like treasures, waiting for the right moment to surface. Tonight, however, she would remain poised, collecting every detail of the evening as if storing it for a dramatic reveal that no one, not even Michael, would ever forget. The first course was served, delicate smoked salmon, garnished with fresh dill, a symphony of flavors that mirrored the elegance of the room. Guests complimented Michael on the wine selection, and Victoria offered quiet nods and smiles, her mind elsewhere. Somewhere deep down she felt a mixture of dread and anticipation. She had suspected Michael for months, whispers of betrayal, strange phone calls, unexplained absences, and yet she had maintained the perfect image, the loving, devoted wife, the one who could make anyone believe in the illusion of harmony. When the dessert course arrived, an elaborate silver anniversary cake adorned with sugar pearls and a delicate filigree pattern, Michael decided it was the right moment. He stood slowly, cleared his throat, and held the envelope in his hand like a trophy. "Family, friends, tonight is a special night," he began, his voice steady, dripping with practiced charm. 25 years, a silver anniversary, and of course a celebration of the life my wife and I have shared. But I've realized some truths cannot wait. Victoria, my dear. All eyes turned to Victoria as Michael extended the envelope toward her with a flourish. "I wanted to give you something meaningful for our anniversary, something unforgettable." There was a pause, pregnant with expectation. Victoria's fingers hovered over the envelope, her mind racing. Then, as she opened it, her face remained composed, but her eyes narrowed just slightly. She unfolded the crisp paper and scanned its contents. Her lips curved to a polite smile, but there was no warmth behind it. The words were unmistakable. Divorce papers, signed and notarized, ready to be executed immediately. A murmur rippled through the room. Guests exchanged uneasy glances. Some whispered, others gasped audibly. Michael's smile widened. This was the moment he had envisioned. The shock, the betrayal, the humiliation, all delivered in a meticulously staged performance. He stepped back, arms wide, as if presenting a gift worthy of applause. Victoria's smile never faltered. She folded the papers with slow, deliberate precision and placed them on the table. Then she reached for the small box she had been hiding beneath the tablecloth, a beautiful velvet case she had been keeping secret for weeks. She lifted it, letting the dim candlelight catch on the silver edges, and opened it to reveal a set of documents of her own, inheritance papers, detailing her sudden acquisition of a vast fortune from her late uncle, a man of immense wealth who had always admired her independence and sharp mind. The room went silent, the tension so thick it seemed to press against every wall. Victoria's voice, calm yet commanding, broke through the stillness. "Michael, I see you've decided to gift me a divorce tonight. How thoughtful, but I believe gifts are meant to be shared, not used as weapons. You see, I have a gift of my own." She gestured toward the documents. "I have just inherited my uncle's estate, a substantial fortune, which, thanks to..." As Victoria stepped out of the room, the soft click of her heels echoed against the marble floor, reverberating like a drumbeat of authority. Inside, the air seemed to thicken with tension. Guests were frozen mid-sip, mid-laughter, mid-conversation, caught in the web of a revelation none of them had expected. Murmurs began to swell like a tide, subtle at first, then louder, a ripple of disbelief washing over the room. "Did she just—" whispered Aunt Margaret, clutching her champagne glass. I can't believe it," stammered Michael's mother, her hand trembling as she reached for a napkin. "Michael, what is happening?" Michael tried to rise, to compose himself, but the polished veneer of control he had maintained for decades cracked under the weight of scrutiny. His eyes darted across the room, desperately searching for allies, for sympathy, for someone, anyone who would validate his plan. But instead, he found faces frozen in judgment, some sympathetic to Victoria, some shocked by his audacity, and others utterly appalled. He cleared his throat, attempting to inject humor where none existed. "Well, it's just a surprise, a little dramatic flair, nothing more." But no one laughed. The whispers only grew, and his words sounded hollow, empty, lacking the charm that once masked his manipulations. His mistress, who had thought she would share in his triumph, now shrank further into her chair, glancing nervously at Victoria's documents on the table. Her earlier confidence dissolved into panic, and she avoided everyone's gaze, realizing her role in Michael's schemes had left her exposed. Meanwhile, Victoria waited in the hallway, allowing herself a deep, controlled breath. She didn't need to rush. Every second she let pass only magnified Michael's humiliation. She thought of the months she had spent uncovering his secrets, the late-night calls, the hidden accounts, the sudden unexplained trips. She remembered every time she had held back, pretending not to notice, gathering evidence with meticulous patience. Tonight, all that careful planning was about to pay off. Back in the room, Michael attempted to regain control. He gestured toward the dessert, trying to distract the guests. "Please, enjoy the cake, everyone. Let's not let a small misunderstanding ruin the celebration." A soft, almost imperceptible laugh escaped from Victoria as she watched through the doorway. Misunderstanding? He called a divorce gift a misunderstanding. The audacity was staggering. But she didn't interrupt yet. She wanted him to unravel entirely on his own. Family members began to speak in low tones, exchanging details they had overheard or speculated. "I saw them together last week. Could it be true? But the papers, he planned this?" The air was charged with gossip, scandal, and intrigue. Michael's carefully cultivated reputation was cracking under the scrutiny of those he had assumed would support him blindly. Finally, unable to bear the growing murmurs, Michael attempted a more direct confrontation. He rose, pale and sweating, and pointed toward the hallway where Victoria had disappeared. "Victoria, wait! You can't! This isn't fair! This is our anniversary, our family!" But Victoria didn't respond immediately. She allowed him a moment of false hope before stepping back into the room, her silver gown flowing, documents in hand, her expression one of calm authority. The room fell silent once again, the tension snapping like a taut wire. "Michael," she said, her voice steady and clear, "you chose this path. You planned your grand revelation, hoping to humiliate me and secure some perverse sense of victory. I admire your commitment to theatrics, truly, but the truth is far more powerful than your illusions." She walked slowly toward the table, placing the inheritance documents and supporting papers down with deliberate precision. "These documents represent my independence, my control over assets you never imagined, and they are just the beginning." Michael's eyes widened in disbelief. He stumbled over words, trying to formulate a response, but every syllable sounded weaker than the last. The guests watched, riveted as the balance of power shifted completely. And let's talk about accountability. You've been hiding a mistress, draining our finances, lying to everyone here. That ends tonight. Everyone present, including family and friends, will now know the truth. She gestured toward the chair where Michael's mistress had cowered. This isn't speculation or rumor. These are facts. A hush fell over the room. Conversation ceased mid-word. Utensils paused in mid-air. Eyes widened. Michael's mother gasped audibly, while his father's face turned ashen. His friends shifted uncomfortably, realizing the narrative they had assumed about Michael was crumbling before their very eyes. Victoria took a final step forward, her gaze unwavering. Michael, you chose this path. You planned your grand revelation, hoping to humiliate me and secure some perverse sense of victory. I admire your commitment to theatrics, truly, but the truth is far more powerful than your illusions. She took a final step forward, her gaze unwavering. Michael, you chose this. The night outside was calm, the city lights flickering like distant stars. But inside Michael's mansion, the storm was far from over. He sat slumped at the dining table, staring blankly at the half-eaten anniversary cake, the divorce papers still lying in front of him like a cruel joke. His hands shook slightly, the adrenaline of anticipation replaced by dread and disbelief. His carefully constructed world had collapsed in minutes, and he had no idea how to rebuild it. The guests had mostly left, lingering only long enough to exchange hushed conversations and condolences. Michael's friends offered weak reassurances, but their eyes betrayed judgment. Even his own family, who had once stood loyally at his side, now looked at him with skepticism and disappointment. Michael's mother, usually the first to defend him, avoided his gaze entirely, murmuring excuses about needing rest. His father shook his head slowly, the disappointment radiating in every line of his face. Meanwhile, Victoria had already returned to her new reality. She arrived at her penthouse, the velvet case with inheritance documents still in hand, and set them carefully on the marble counter. Every page represented not just wealth, but freedom, a life she could now command entirely on her own terms. She poured herself a glass of wine and leaned against the counter, allowing herself a brief smile. No one could touch her now. She was untouchable in dignity and resources. Over the next days, Victoria moved strategically. She didn't flaunt her wealth. Instead, she used it as a shield and a sword. She ensured that her accounts were secure, legally separating any joint assets and safeguarding her inheritance. Every transaction was deliberate, calculated, a silent message to Michael. She was untouchable. Meanwhile, Michael floundered, attempting to control the narrative through social media, calling family members and even sending texts to mutual friends, but every move backfired. His excuses sounded hollow, his charm ineffective, and the web of lies he had relied upon unraveled entirely. Word of the anniversary disaster spread quickly through their social circles. Friends who had once envied Michael's apparent success now whispered about his arrogance, his betrayal, and his spectacular public humiliation. Colleagues at work avoided him, unsure how to navigate the scandal that had erupted. Even the mistress, desperate and humiliated, severed all contact, leaving him entirely isolated. Victoria, on the other hand, began building her new life with precision. She invested portions of her inheritance in safe, high-yield ventures and strategically acquired properties that would guarantee long-term financial stability. She hired advisors she trusted implicitly, ensuring every decision reinforced her independence. The public exposure of Michael's affair and deceit became a quiet legend among their social circle, a cautionary tale of arrogance, betrayal, and the power of foresight. Weeks passed, and Michael's desperation deepened. He attempted to attend social gatherings, to apologize, to explain, but the reception was frosty. Invitations dried up, calls went unanswered, and every interaction reminded him of the empire of respect and influence he had lost. He believed his dramatic gift of divorce papers would position him as a cunning victor. Instead, it made him the laughingstock of a circle that once admired him. Victoria, meanwhile, thrived. She traveled, not for luxury, but for strategic business meetings, securing investments that compounded her wealth exponentially. Her social presence grew, but unlike Michael, she cultivated respect, admiration, and influence. People were drawn to her calm intelligence, her strategic mind, and her unshakable composure. Every encounter reinforced the lesson she had demonstrated so vividly. Betrayal cannot outmaneuver preparation, and arrogance cannot triumph over calculated patience. Months later, the final blow came. Michael, desperate to regain any semblance of control, attempted to finalize a deal at work, leveraging connections he had assumed would protect him. But the news of his public humiliation had already spread to professional networks. The deal fell through. Colleagues questioned his reliability, and his reputation, once pristine, was irreparably damaged. Every step he took to recover only reminded him of the choices that led to his downfall. Victoria received updates through the grapevine with a quiet sense of satisfaction, never gloating, always composed. She did not need to confront him directly. The world had already demonstrated. Months had passed since the disastrous anniversary night. Victoria had transformed her life completely. The inheritance she had quietly secured became the foundation of her independence, a shield against betrayal and a springboard toward success. She had invested wisely, expanded her influence, and cultivated a social and professional circle that respected her intelligence, resilience, and calm authority. Michael, by contrast, had become a shadow of the man he once was. Friends and colleagues who had once sought his advice avoided him now, wary of his tarnished reputation. The mistress had vanished from his life, leaving him completely isolated. His attempts to recover his dignity were met with polite dismissal or silent judgment. Every step he took reminded him of his arrogance, his deception, and the dramatic downfall he had brought upon himself. Victoria, however, did not dwell on revenge. She did not gloat, and she did not need to. Her victory had been quiet, but absolute. Each decision she made, from investment to social engagement, was a reaffirmation of her independence and foresight. She had turned betrayal into empowerment, humiliation into opportunity, and a potentially devastating moment into the foundation of a life she could fully control. One crisp evening, Victoria attended a charity gala, her silver gown catching the light, her presence commanding attention without effort. People whispered admiration as she moved through the crowd, discussing ventures, sharing insights, and inspiring others with her intelligence and grace. Michael, who had tried to attend, lingered at the edges unnoticed, a man marked by his own mistakes, powerless to intervene or impress. Victoria paused for a moment by a balcony, looking out at the city skyline, her mind reflecting on the journey. She remembered the shock, the betrayal, the humiliation, and the careful patience that had guided her through it all. She smiled faintly, a quiet acknowledgement of her own strength. She had survived what could have destroyed her, and she had emerged not only unbroken, but thriving, wealthier, wiser, and free. The story of the anniversary gift that had been meant to humiliate became a legend within their circles, not as a tale of scandal, but as a testament to the power of preparation, intelligence, and composure. Victoria had rewritten the narrative entirely on her own terms, and as the night deepened, she knew without question that she would never be vulnerable to betrayal again. She had won, not just the battle, but her life, her dignity, and her freedom. The chapter of Michael's arrogance had closed, and Victoria's story of empowerment had only just begun.